The pull. No matter how long we live, our lives are ultimately just a series of moments. Moments and the choices we make within them. The remainder of our lives only serve as filler or something to hold us over in between such moments. I'm having one of those times right now. My final instant. On the instrument panel in front of me, I see my death written out in graphic detail. It predicts that after a few more seconds, maybe a half minute or so, my single-engine Cessna Centurion will be airbound before plunging like the proverbial rock to earth a half-mile below. I'm not going to pull a rabbit out of a hat or perform a DIY project with plastic cement and rubber bands to keep my little plane in the air. All I can see beneath me is the rough landscape of what must be northeast Georgia's Gilmer County. A few minutes earlier, I had passed the lights of Ellijay, the county seat and tiny town of about 20,000 citizens. It's too late to turn around, and if I could find somewhere to settle down, I doubt it would be very much. With rivers and national parks, the entire county is awful and lacks any truly suitable, convenient locations to attempt a controlled crash landing. I must be getting close to Chattahoochee National Forest's edge. Whatever I do, I'm going to end up in a forest wilderness if I try to turn or go straight ahead. I'm hoping that what I learned in Sunday school about heaven is true right now, but I'm not sure. Though I've always kept them hidden from my loved ones, I've always had my misgivings. Though I secretly know I'm an atheist, I would describe myself as an agnostic. After this, nothing happens. There will be suffering for a little while, I hope, and then nothing. Lewis Walters and everything he has known, seen, loved, and been over the past 34 years will just disappear into the ether like a candle in the wind. Don't even bother, I'm an attorney. I've heard every joke ever told about lawyers, and I've even come up with a couple. I wonder if I can just walk away from this, make a last-minute pact with God to spare me if he's up there, but I already know the answer. Another few seconds pass while I frenziedly adjust the radio controls. The only thing worse than thinking about how soon I'm going to die is thinking about dying silently to everyone I've ever loved or cared about. They won't know what or who I was thinking about in my final moments because I will simply disappear. After practically becoming addicted to talk radio for years, I've recently grown to like music once more. Who would you call with your last goodbye? Is a line from the song Live Like You're Dying. Just a short while ago, I was listening to it on my iPod to pass the time during a tedious trip back to Jacksonville, Florida, my hometown, following a Tennessee court hearing for a client. That statement is the most significant question in my life right now, and I find myself thinking about it a lot. It used to be just a random thought. The other thing that's on my mind, strangely enough, or maybe not so strangely, is a comic book. Aside from being a late-blooming fan of music, I have always loved science fiction, fantasy, and comic books. The Watchmen is, in my opinion, the best science fiction movie ever made, and it's part of one of the greatest comic book series ever. The story revolves around adult superheroes, and Dr. Manhattan is the only true superhero. He gained godlike powers due to a standard comic book accident, which is fine, but what really intrigued me about him was that he existed outside of time, perceiving the past, present, and future all at once. It always depresses me as an attorney who makes his money off of shattered hearts and dysfunctional families and businesses when a beautiful ending smacks you in the face. My partner in our two-man firm, Norman, is a hound. Ever since we started our business 10 years ago, right out of the University of Florida Law School, I've lost count of the number of secretaries, legal aides, female reporters, waitresses, female judges, female police officers, you name it. He's slept, sometimes juggling 3 or 4 of them along at the same time, usually without any of them knowing about the other women. On Friday, he told me he was going to be turning off his cell phone early, calling it a hot date, but I could hear the grin in his voice. Though I've always been content with my marriage to Mona, even if I had been a cheater, I got tired of watching Norman juggle his women. It amazed me how the hell he could even manage to get it up that many times a week. Norman would run from flower to flower depositing his load of. Well, the analogy breaks down there. We met in law school, and Mona, a tall, 5'10" brunette with long hair, actually had her legal degree and had been practicing for a time after we started dating. Her contacts helped our business, of course, and after we found out we couldn't have kids and that's basically me, didn't want to adopt. The volunteering filled a void in her life. I was busy as hell and only rarely found myself staring at friends' kids and missing what we'd never have. But after we got married and I started making decent money, she decided she was going to become a volunteer queen. She volunteered for everything. When we got married, our love life had been fairly hot, but we were young. As we grew older and I threw more of myself into the practice, essentially compensating for Norman's energy spent chasing women, Mona and our FaceTime became less frequent. She seemed to derive most of her pleasure from doing good deeds and similar crap, and she felt increasingly exhausted whenever I would roll over late at night and try to play with her. To cut a long tale short, I pretty much expected Mona to be at the same charity event based on past experience, and I figured she wouldn't mind if I went in. It surprises me even more when I get out of my car and look into our 2-car garage and find it occupied by 2 cars. One is Mona's sporty little Mustang, and the other is, surprise, surprise, my faithful partner's SUV. It's 1 in the morning, and as I pull around a corner, our 2-story townhouse is in front of me. As an attorney, I deal with divorces on a regular basis, therefore, you can't call me naive. Like you, the first thing that comes to mind isn't a pleasant one, but after experiencing pain I wasn't really prepared for, I force myself to take a deep breath and weigh my options. As long as Norman has been my partner, I considered him a friend, and from what I could gather, Mona at least tried to take care of me, even though our relationship didn't have the same intense, passionate beginnings. It may be something very terrible, but it could also be very innocent. It's possible that Mona didn't have an event this weekend, that Norman's hot date fell through, and that they were just talking and enjoying a drink or going out to dinner. A man and a woman do not jump into bed and begin to sleep carefree the moment they meet, despite what you read in dirty stories and my own experience as an attorney. Even if everything is innocent, the sound of the alarm would certainly frighten the living daylights out of them both. So I can't help but feel apprehensive as I unlock the front door and immediately punch in the code for the downstairs burglar alarm. I put my suitcase down in the living room and hear music from above. The downstairs lights are on, but that's not a big deal because we pretty much always have them on. I do wonder why they're not down here in the living room, though. We have a music center and a big screen television in our second-floor den. As I put my hand on the staircase to go upstairs, I nearly turn around and ask myself, if there is something going on, let's call a spade a spade. If my wife is upstairs sleeping my partner, do I want to know? Because even if I go and return tomorrow, I'll still have a marriage and a working partnership that has made me prosperous, fat, and happy. If I find out something I don't want to find out, then I'll have to do something, thus drastically altering my life. I've come to hate change. I give it some more thought. She's been a nice wife for all these years, for the most part. Do I still love her? I hadn't given it any thought for years, but I suppose I do. If it weren't for the peculiar ache in my stomach, I wouldn't be feeling anything at all. Maybe I can heat up our relationship, or find some horny secretary or divorcee to screw myself and raise my ego enough to live with her stepping out on me, if she's just playing me for fun. I place my hand back on the staircase and begin my gradual ascent up the steps, not even sure why I'm going upstairs, when it would make so much more sense to just walk away and live my life to the fullest, but I do it nonetheless. Then I'm upstairs, in the den. The light is on, but the noise is coming from our bedroom through the other door. There's music and other sounds, and I'm getting sicker and sicker. Must have been something I ate on the plane ride home. It looks like a scene from a really bad horror movie, when the idiotic youngsters are racing toward the giant knife-wielding serial killer and you're screaming at them to go the other way, you dumbasses. But they're not listening and are heading straight for their deaths. I make an effort to tell myself repeatedly, don't open the door, yet I still manage to do so. I love my cheating, stupid wife. It's true what they say, you don't know what you have until you don't have it anymore. I had a wife I loved, even though I'd forgotten that fact. But now that I don't have her anymore, I never will. The only lamp on the bedroom stand closest to the window is on, casting a pale light on the scene in front of me. But it's enough. They're too engrossed in what they're doing to look at me. They're on my bed, with Mona's eyes squeezed shut as though she's in pain and Norman looking up at what appears to be the ceiling. The look on their faces when they realize what they've heard and that I'm standing close to them makes me wish I had brought a video camera. I could have won $100,000 on America's Funniest Home Video. Norman's mouth just opens wide. Mona turns to face me, opens her eyes, and then shuts them. This is so precious. Norman has stopped pistoning. Trying to be nice, I add, it seems like I cut you guys off in the middle of something. Continue and finish up. I'll be down in the living room when you're ready to talk. Obviously, Norm, you ought to be familiar with your surroundings by now. After a second of my standing there, Mona abruptly pushes Norman back. Normie, I really don't see how you can charge $200 per hour for your speaking abilities. If you're too young to remember Seinfeld, then forget it. But Norman is the quintessential tall, dark, and handsome ladies' man. He's about 3 feet taller than me and is lean because he works out daily to maintain a taut midsection even at 35. As I mentioned earlier, I don't feel any particular way about his appearance, but I've spoken to enough of his girlfriend, both past and present, to know that there's something about him that appeals to a lot of women. You know, Lou, this isn't what it appears to be. Could have fooled me, Normie. Looks like you were screwing the living daylights out of my wife, with her enthusiastic cooperation. He tries desperately to get his bearings. I know, that was stupid, Lou. What I meant was, this just happened. Neither one of us meant for it to happen. We thought you'd stay over in New York, and my date fell through. Mona called, and said her event had been canceled. We were just going to have a couple of glasses of wine and we drank too much, and it was my fault, Lou. You know me, I'm a jerk around women, and Mona is so hot. Blame me. Oh, I do, Norm, trust me, I do. So this was a one-time thing. The first time you two stabbed me in the back, so to speak. He is so willing to tell me this falsehood that he is almost pitiful. Oh, yes, man. Believe it or not, Lou, we're friends. I would never have moved on Mona if I wasn't drunk and horny because of that date that went south. The restroom is silent, but the sounds of vomiting have stopped. Mona, sounds like you're better now. Come on out. We need to talk. Stillness. I try to be lighthearted and talkative, but there's always a hint of annoyance in my voice. After giving her 15 seconds, she opens the door and leaves. She no longer has to conceal her intimate parts from her spouse because she has discovered a robe. Look at me. She doesn't look up. I see there aren't any tears in her eyes as she looks up at me. She's upset that I ended her session, and she's probably already aware that our marriage is gone, but she doesn't feel bad about what she did to me. Normie says this was the first time. It just happened, because you were alone together and started drinking. He says it was all his fault. She turns to face him, and he's clearly pleading with her to believe what he's saying. She gives a headshake. It's not me she's speaking to, but him. Norm, don't be so stupid. He's a jerk, but he's not stupid. He hurt us. She then turns to face me. We've been sleeping for a year. Almost every time you went away and anytime you were tied up on a case and he and I could get together. I'm determined that this bee will never realize how much she has harmed me and how much she has torn my heart out. If nothing else, I'm going to take my pride with me, and I'll make sure these dishonest guys never forget who I am. Why? She smiles at me, and that's when I understand that I no longer love her. Instead, I detest her with a ferocious hatred. Norm, you were paying off the entrance guards to tip you off if I came in, right? Unfortunately, you didn't spread the grease around widely enough. They had a new man on tonight, and he didn't know to give you a heads up, I say, rubbing my chin as if reflecting for a moment before continuing. I'm going to be leaving now. I wouldn't feel safe going to sleep around either one of you. And that helps me realize that there will be enough unanswered questions for me to be able to uncover proof of your extramarital affair. I'll find a judge who's been burnt by a cheating wife, Mona, and I'll give you as much as I can in terms of a new boyfriend. As little as possible of my assets, no alimony. You've already practiced law, so I'm sure you can get work elsewhere, most likely at Normie's new firm. However, your days of volunteering for society are over, and I'll do all in my power to publicize your activities, so you might not be as popular in civil society. She's always been smart, top of her class, actually, just below me, and she just looks at me. I'm sure she's already seen that coming. I look to my pal and previous partner. As for you, my old friend, I know you've never wanted this penny anti-lawyer nonsense. It has always served as a tool. You're a creature of politics. I am aware that you have spent years preparing the wealthy banking family, the Hunts, to support your candidacy for state attorney. Well, you have to understand that the Hunts and the people they work with are very moral types. It all stems back to the grandpa who passed away and started them. When this scandal becomes public, I believe your chances of receiving any money from the Hunts will be zero. Mona gets up and takes off her robe, showcasing her still amazing figure. That's your payback, you wretched little wimp. Are you going to force me to resume my job? Are you suggesting that Norm will have to work a little harder to obtain his political seed money? If you were truly enraged, I can't even begin to imagine what you might do. Give us cuts on paper or something similar. She approaches me and stops, her hands resting on her gorgeous hips. Norm, do you want to know why I slept? That's the reason. There is no blood in your veins. But, no, not you. When you find out that your wife has been having an affair for a year, you just stand there, composed and unflappable. You don't yell, cry, or scream. And you don't really care, which is why. Did you never truly love me? It was basically a marriage where you could eat as much free meat as you wanted. I am so pleased of myself for being able to smile at her, and I adore the look on her face when I finally get my point over. It was just easier to be married to you than to go through the hassle of divorcing you. I always knew you were a smart girl, Mona. No, I don't love you. Looking back, I guess I never did. That's why it was so easy to let it slide away. I turn and head for the door, but not before taking one final look at her. She has this weird expression on her face, and even though I know now that she doesn't care about me, I can't really figure out why she looks so sad. That you two were screwing your brains out doesn't really matter to me. However, I'm convinced that too many individuals are already aware of it. I refuse to be the target of jokes from our friends, fellow attorneys, and coworkers, the foolish husband whose partner and wife are giggling while they let him stay the night. I'm going to divorce you, Mona, and I'm going to do my best to ruin you, Norm, to salvage my pride. That's the only reason I give a damn what either of you do. And now, I hope you two have really miserable, short, crappy lives. Bye. I'm still furiously tinkering with the radio knobs in an attempt to reach someone, anybody. What little radio reception I might receive is going to be ruined by the rain, which is falling harder right now. The lightweight Cessna is beginning to feel the wind whipping it like a badminton ball. I'll be falling to the earth blind in a matter of minutes because it's almost too dark to see. I'm not going to survive this. This small bird is resilient. It's been well maintained for its 25 years, having been made in 1984. But it's not resilient enough to withstand an unforeseen collision with the ground. I'll never understand why, in the midst of nowhere, the gasoline gauge indicates empty. We can only hope that Mom or Cindy, who, well, isn't my wife yet, won't have the legal right to sue, but Mom does, will drag the tiny private airfield where the Cessna was serviced and fueled to court and give them a legal boot. Someone made a serious error. Either they let trash or debris to get into the gasoline lines where it's clogged and choked off the supply of fuel to the engine, or they neglected to check the fuel gauge to make sure it wasn't providing a false full reading and it's sucking air 400 miles from home. I wish Mom a prosperous last few years from my inheritance as well as a massive verdict against the airfield. 2 weeks before our wedding, I did something stupid that almost killed myself. I hope Cindy will forgive me. That is the worst thing ever, my God. However, that will all continue without me and is now entirely academic in nature. The next few minutes or seconds, and whether or not anyone will hear me in my last moments, are all that truly count and are under my control. Time changes once more. I whisper to Ken Clavius, who stands in for me in this never-ending battle to get rid of my ex-wife. A year has passed. Never does a divorce take a year. What the hell is she up to this time? He smiles at me, tight and serious. It's a god-end war of the roses, and I'm starting to have nightmares about what your wife is going to come up with next. When you hired me and told me your wife was another lawyer, I assumed that could pose a few problems. So far, we've heard about abuse, mental abuse, legal abuse, conspiracy, interstate commerce, though the judge and I don't really see her case there, as well as the 4th and 14th Amendments and the still unpassed Equal Rights Amendment. Then he gives me a look that makes me think he's kidding just a little bit. Is there any possibility you would think about making amends, if only to put this terrible situation behind you? Not while my body is still breathing, or rather, on top of my corpse. Everyone stand up. Not Circuit Judge Catherine Holden, who has been hearing most of the motions, but a man I know even though I'm not familiar with him in these kinds of cases, enters the doorway from the judge's chambers where we stand. It's the Criminal Division's hanging judge, Judge Herman Herring. Charlie Case, his bailiff, is a former criminal who is standing by his side. His size is nearly that of a mansion, and he possesses muscles that the majority of ordinary people lack. He is Herring's companion and bodyguard. Over the past 20 years, Herring has brought some of the most high-profile criminal cases to the Jacksonville Judicial Circuit. However, Herring is hearing a divorce case. What the hell is he doing? Clavius stands up and walks up to Case. Herring shuffles papers while they exchange whispers. His expression is one of amazement when he returns. Herring and Holden used to be an item before they had an amicable split about a year ago. She asked him, as a personal favor, to take this case. Case says she told Herring if she had to hear one more motion from your wife, she thought she was going to leap over the bench and strangle her. Quote unquote. I hear something behind me, and when I turn to look, I see Mona entering. The fact that she has persisted on using her married name only makes me angrier. She's wearing a skirt and blue shirt that look quite professional. What irks me is that, despite knowing what she's done with it, I would still insure that bastard for $1 million. She takes a seat across from Clavius and me at the desk. Herring speaks up to her, clearing his throat. Ms. Walters, I presume. Yes, Your Honor. I have been made aware of the tortuously long history of this case and told that you have yet another motion to present today. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Would you care to inform the court of the nature of that motion? And please, Ms. Walters, be concise. You realize, I hope, that you are nearing a local, if not statewide, record for one of the longest divorce proceedings on record, he says, giving her a look that would reduce hardened hitmen to blubbering wretches. Yes, I know that, Your Honor. I also know, of course, that as the presiding judge of the Smith-Wright contract murder case, which lasted 18 months and is still the longest criminal proceeding outside a grand jury case in this nation, you understand that sometimes justice must move slowly to obtain equitable results. Herring's eyes widen, and Case finds it difficult to contain his laughter. I sit there, astonished. One of the harshest criminal judges in the nation has recently been pushed back by my soon-to-be ex-wife, who has only been an attorney for a few years. I believe I must have perished and entered hell. Anyway, Your Honor, I have just come into possession of a new piece of evidence that has bearing on this case. It is an audio recording. I ask permission to play it for this court. To what end? After it is played, I will present a motion to the court and a proposal to Mr. Walters. If he accepts it and the court accedes, I think it will allow this case to finally come to a close. With his head in his hands, Clavius murmurs, "Thank God." I prod him. Ask her what kind of audio recording she has. Your Honor, could we inquire about the nature of this recording before she gives it to us? Mona gives me the kind of smile a cat might give a canary it was about to swallow. This is a taped conversation between Mr. Walters and his mother, Mrs. Justine Walters, that was recorded almost a year ago, Your Honor. I am aware of what it is, and Clavius is powerless to stop me from leaping to my feet and making my way toward the bee. I yell, she can't play that recording, it's private, privileged conversation. It's not hers, I have no idea how in the world she obtained it. I feel Case's massive body behind me and find myself at her table going for the tape when my arms are locked to my side and I cannot possibly release myself. A commotion ensues, and I perceive Herring yelling, "Mister, before I put your client in jail, Clavius, bring him under control. Return him to his table, Charlie." I'm thinking of a way to strike Case in the balls and incapacitate him long enough to get the tape. but he's too big for me, so he seats me at the table next to Clavius and stands over me to make sure I don't move. Do you have the legal right to possess that tape, Ms. Walters? Holden asks Mona. She extends a document. Mrs. Walters, who heard and videotaped the conversation, has signed and notarized a statement, which I have here with her consent. As you are undoubtedly aware, it is legal in Florida for someone to record a phone conversation without the other party's knowledge or consent. Typical mom. Herring says, "Let me see it," but I get in the way. Your Honor, don't bother. I acknowledge that my mother is the source. Give the damn thing to her to play. Herring gives me a peculiar look and then asks, "Would you rather we play it in chambers with just myself, counsel, and yourself there?" In a kinder tone. It doesn't matter. No, I am aware of what's on it. Furthermore, it makes no difference to whom else hears it. It won't result in any changes. Mrs., would you please play the tape, Walters, sufficiently loud for me to hear it? My ears have changed since I was in my 20s. Yes, sir. I've been phoning you all day, Lewis. Is that you? So you finally answer my call. Where have you been? I was probably out at several bars getting stinking drunk, Mom. To be honest. Sorry. Lewis, what in the world is going on down there? I got a call from Mona that I couldn't believe. She said you've left her and told her you're getting a divorce. I can't believe that. Believe it. But why? I thought you two were happy. I know it was terrible that you couldn't have kids, but you'd moved past that. I left her because I caught her sleeping another guy. Lewis Walters. Watch your mouth. I'm your mother, and I refuse to believe she would do that. I'm sorry, Mom, but it's true. I caught her in bed with Norman, my partner, and she told me they'd been having an affair for a year. For a solid year. Not a one-night stand. Not a temporary affair. But 1 year. Son, I have no idea what to say. I really apologize. Me too. And I am, too. She declared that she doesn't want to lose you and that she still loves you. How do you love someone and sleep with another man for a year? And she's already lost me. There's no going back, Mom. I know you liked her. Hell, I loved her, but there's no way. Son, Lewis. She said she thought you were divorcing her because you didn't love her anymore. Actually, she said she thought that maybe you never loved her. That you just married her for bonding. For convenience. The miserable lying bee. Did you tell her that, Lou? That you'd never loved her at all? Indeed, Mother. She laughed at me when she told me that she had been connecting well with my partner for a year and that I wasn't half the man he was. I stopped doing it for her in bed. I simply told her I had never loved her, lying. The way she was hurting me, I wanted to hurt her too. It is not apparent to me why it could have caused her pain, as there is no way she could have felt anything for me and taken the actions she did. Lou, I don't understand anything about this, but I trusted her when she said she loved you. If she loves me, which I know I do even though I don't want to, then we're both incredibly flawed people. Mom, look, I'm speechless. I'll give you a call later. The courtroom is completely silent, something I have never experienced before. There are so many people trying not to feel sorry for me that it makes me want to slide beneath the table and hold my breath until it all goes away. When I contacted my mother, the way her phone system is set up, the call was automatically recorded. She had picked up soon after the recording started, and it continued to tape as we spoke. I want to blame my mother, but I understand why she did it. She was just being a mother, trying to help her son to the very end. I know that she held off giving it to Mona because she knew it would hurt me, but when she thought we'd never get back together again, she gave it to Mona. The nuclear bomb of divorce cases. But she can't help me here. I know that when she realized she had a tape, her motherly brain started working on how she could use it to help bring her two favorite people on earth back together again despite themselves. I force myself to look up at Mona. I don't know what to expect, but I think it will be triumph or revenge. She's shown that she was the winner of the exchange. She took off my balls and made me less of a man, and my attempt at retaliation was exposed as a petty act. I loved her, and she clearly didn't love me. It was a big deal. I end the quiet. Mona, congratulations. You're a far better lawyer than I ever gave you credit for, if I haven't already stated so. Perhaps you will receive your decision today. Perhaps you will win here, whatever it may be. Perhaps you will continue to drag this out for the next 10 years. One thing, nevertheless, will never alter. I'm never going to take you back. Never again will we be together. She talks to Herring, ignoring me. I would now like to make my motion, Your Honor. Herring glances down at his paperwork, clearly uncomfortable by what he's heard. He's probably more at ease listening to someone admit to beating and stabbing each other than he is with this kind of sentimental nonsense. Okay, go. She gets to her feet and walks up to Herring on the bench. Your Honor, I will admit that I have put up every barrier I know how to keep my spouse from divorcing me. I may have squandered the court's time and money, but I was battling for the guy I love and the possibility of living with him once more. I have no excuse for that, although I had what I thought were reasons. I thought my marriage was a lie and a sham, and that a man I loved did not love me anymore. If he ever did, there was another man, an exciting man and a wonderful lover, who wanted me. I gave myself to him. Without getting into too much detail, as the tape indicates, I engaged in a year-long adulterous affair with another man. I stated the things he mentioned on the tape when my husband found out about us. I stated those things in an attempt to anger and injure him. for I was trying one more desperate stab at getting him to show me that he had affections for me. I reasoned that if those words did not make him angry, did not make him show any desire for me, then I was correct all along and our marriage was over. I have no guarantee that he would ever be able to forgive me for what I did, but I do know now that in spite of his words, he did love me, and I believe he still does. You've heard his comments on the tape. He told me he had never loved me, that he did not love me. He confirmed what I had feared. But as the tape also confirms, those statements were lies. Your Honor, all I'm requesting is that you mandate that Mr. Walters attend 10 counseling sessions with me in order for his divorce to proceed. I'll stipulate that he get the divorce if, after that 10 sessions, he still wants one. No more physical altercations or gestures. I'll simply turn aside. Herring gives me a look. All right, I'll carry it out. 10 meetings. Finished. God, I am so grateful to you. I'm grateful. Then, Static, I heard you a little bit. You claim to be going to act. Where? Coordinates. Using my left hand, I tightly grip the radio, and with my right, I make an effort to steady the wheel. It is nearly dark. More shapes than actual objects are visible to me, but I know that I cross the top of a large hill on my left. Even though I've reduced my throttle as much as possible while maintaining my wings raised, my airspeed is still over 90 miles per hour. I can practically see the tops of what appear to be trees below, maybe 50 to 75 feet below. This Centurion is not quite as well made as my Escalade, so I can only imagine what it would be like to hit those trees at 90 miles per hour. Little fragments of me in the airplane will be strewn everywhere. If I strike from this altitude rather than a half mile up, I have a somewhat better chance of surviving. But the drawback is that I won't have more time than a few seconds left when the gas runs out. Not about a minute to dive in. About 30 miles south-southeast of Eliway, just coming into the Chattahoochee Forest. I'm Lou Walters, from Jacksonville. Get that? 30 miles to the south-southeast. Not at all. Please put this in writing. Aim for the shot. I just don't have the time to lie to myself, so I take a thorough look at myself in the next seconds and reveal the spot where truth is usually hidden from you. After realizing what the reality is, I speak the few words I think I'll have time to say. The lone engine makes a sputtering sound and shudders to a halt. All that remains is the sound of the wind howling and the heavy rain beating against the cockpit windshield. The marriage counselor is a woman, tall and blonde with a little resemblance to the affable but cruel cheerleader coach on the television program Glee. Her lips are to die for, and she's tall, gorgeous, and stunning, so I've often puzzled why she never gets romance roles. Perhaps because she's so darn hot, males are intimidated. Dr. Myers is not particularly attractive, but she's pretty dang hot for a lady who must be in her late 40s. As she talks on, I try to waste time by mentally stripping her with my eyes. Mr. Walters, could you please weigh in? Myers sounds a little annoyed, which I suppose is understandable given that I haven't been the greatest candidate for marital counseling these last 6 meetings. I apologize, Dr. Myers. My thoughts strayed. I'm hoping this is okay. Actually, I was pondering how attractive you are. I'm curious as to whether you're married. If looks could kill, Mona glares at me from her comfy leather chair as she sits up straighter and her eyes widen. I'm quite sure she doesn't receive that line very often from her counseling couples. Mr. Walters. Unfortunately, that is wholly incorrect. I appreciate the compliment, but could we please have your back? I must know if your spouse is younger or older than you if you are married. Is he robust and well, or is he just a regular old guy? She scowls, and then a fleeting smile that I know she despises appears on her face. Mr. Walters, please, enough already. You act as like I have no idea what I'm doing. This is simply another cheesy tactic to enrage your wife and gain ground in the continuing conflict you two have been engaged in since the moment you entered this place. Make that you have actually waged. Mrs. Walters seems, and I believe her, to be making a good faith attempt to try to save your marriage or, if that's impossible, at least bring the relationship back to one of friendship. You, on the other hand. Then her voice fades away. Let's try one more time, please, Mr. Walters. And, by the way, yes, I'm married. My husband is the football coach of the Lehigh Commodores, and he is very strong, very big and very, very vigorous. She turns around in her chair and shifts her somewhat modest skirt, giving me a tantalizing look at her leg covered in nylon. She then licks her lips and looks down at the papers in front of her. It appears as though Mona is sucking on a lemon. I adore it. We were discussing your wife's feelings that after you learned that she could not bear you children, and you refused to consider adoption, that you in some way blamed her for this lack in your marriage and that your physical life seemed to be where you took out your frustrations with her. I think we're talking about passive, aggressive retaliation. You simply withdrew from her. Do you think there's any validity to her views? I try not to look at either of them, instead staring down at the floor. All of this is such a waste, and I can't wait to tell Mona the truth. I will, however, wait and let the tension build before venting to my devoted soon-to-be ex-wife. I don't think I ever blamed Mona. Maybe thinking about bonding made me a little sad. Maybe I wasn't quite as hot to trot as I would have been otherwise. Maybe it hurt. I'm not a shrink. Looking back, yeah, it hurt. I was an only child. I wanted children. I always thought a boy and girl combo would be nice. But the main reason was that I was working 7 days a week, 80 and 90 hours a week, to try and build our business and give her the life she seemed to want. Myers taps her desk with her pencil. Mr. Walters, you don't seem to be, excuse me, the most self-aware individual who has ever sat across from me. By that, I mean, I don't think you've ever thought much about your emotions, about why you feel the way you do, why you do the things you do. What the hell does that mean? There are many men, many people, out there who are just like you. Don't be upset. It's not an insult. You're a very hardworking, driven man. You established goals for yourself a long time ago, met a woman you loved, married her, and then focused all of your concentration on becoming successful in your business. I believe that you have been operating on autopilot for a while now in terms of who you are and why you do the things that you do. Remember how you told me at one of our first appointments, when you discussed cheating on your spouse, that you were shocked to learn that her adultery had caused you as much pain as it had. You claimed not to have remembered your affection for her. All right, thus far, you have characterized the majority of the legal profession as well as half of the men who actually live in the United States. I am aware, but take a moment to consider this. How did you expect this woman to know that you loved her if you had forgotten? You had a marriage, a mutually beneficial arrangement that permitted you to live together, split costs, and spend time together whenever you felt like it. Even if you were a cold woman, I told myself, you were still my wife. I took an oath and, remember, I'm an officer of the court. I take oaths seriously. You are an attorney. You know all about oaths and contracts and what they entail. But you threw your oath and your honor into the toilet when you started sleeping my partner. Her gaze has been fixed on mine as she has been intently observing me, like she's attempting to determine whether what I've stated is true. She closes her eyes, and I watch in disbelief as tears well up in her eyes. I can't even express how stunned I am. The last time I saw her weep, I can't recall. Not since she broke my heart that night with Norman, for sure. I want to shout at this idiotic woman. Why now? Why now? Why now? Why are you acting like a human now that everything is gone and you've damaged everything? I am at my breaking point. If I don't say what I've been waiting all this session to say, I'm going to shout and look foolish. I start to get up, surprising them both. Dr. Myers, I know this is unorthodox, but I have something to do and say. I'll continue with these sessions as mandated by the court, but there's something I need you and my wife to know. I think it will put a new light on what we're doing here. She nods her head, but shoots me a warning glance. I approach her office door and enter the waiting area. There she sits. When I give her a gesture, she gets up and approaches me. After giving her a kiss and inhaling her perfume, the day begins to improve. We re-enter Myers' office on foot. She looks at us as though I've developed a second head. Mona's expression is unreadable as she simply stares. Dr. Myers, Mona, this is Cindy Matthews. With a gentle southern drawl, Cindy places one thin arm on my palm and says, It's Carter, honey. Cindy Carter now. I smack myself. I ought to have recalled. Sorry, Cindy Carter. Matthews was her married name. She just got divorced. I turn her slightly to give Mona a clearer picture. Her natural color is blonde. I want to spin her around before Mona and give her a hard time for not understanding that I've moved on. You're right, Mr. Walters, this is highly unorthodox. Who is MS. Carter? And why have you brought her in here? I told you that I would obey the court order to come here for 10 sessions, but I feel it only fair to let you and Mona know about a development that affects what we're doing here. Mona is aware. She was intelligent, I said. The goal of our sessions is to find out if Mona and I can work things out again. I've told her time and time again that it won't work, but she won't believe me for whatever deranged reason. Well, Mona, trust me on this. Cindy and I have been dating for a month. We've grown rather attached and serious. Although I am aware that it is a brief amount of time, I want to investigate the potential of a true commitment. I'll let Cindy express her feelings to you directly. Cindy stares at Mona again, and she has a melancholy expression on her attractive blonde face. Mrs. Walters, I had a disagreement with Lou on this. I told him it was needless and cruel, but he persuaded me in the end that you should know the truth. I'm not here to cause you harm. It took me 2 years to finally break away from him, but even though he was a real scumbag, he only married me to get at my parents' money. My parents own Carter Paving, which is a big paving company here in Jacksonville. Believe me, I know where you are. I got divorced 6 months ago. He didn't try to pick me up, and I didn't go hunting for your husband. My ex-boyfriend Andy had begun to harass me once more, so I went to the courthouse to see if my brother-in-law Lyle could help. Down there, he offers his assistance. I have to say, though, that day I was lost and he was off. I asked Lou if he could help me find the office I needed when I saw him standing near the elevators. He seemed to belong there. He was so kind that once I was done, I went to thank him again and we struck up a conversation when I saw him standing at the snack bar. Since then, we have virtually every night together. She flushes. I mean, all night long, every night. It may seem awful, but there was chemistry right away and a bond between us. I didn't want to have a sexual relationship with a married man, but he persuaded me that everything you owned was lost. She flushes a fiery red now. I know you'll be hurt, but you should know. I could adore him, I think. I'm aware that I can't get enough of him in bed. I never imagined that after Andy, I would feel like I was 17 again. In bed, he is so damn good. I find it inconceivable that any woman, including you, would discard him in favor of another man. However, you did, and I'm after him." Mona simply glances at her and then at me. "Lou, you might be playing a swindle on me. You really are that intelligent. She might just be a cheap tramp you hired to pretend to be your girlfriend in order to get me to leave these therapy sessions. Look it over, Mona. Make use of some detectives. Richard and Ricky Carter, her parents, are the owners of the large West Side paving company. She is able to access their wealth because they are millionaires. Her brother happens to be a reasonably well-known home builder. Lyle, her brother-in-law, teaches at JU in addition to volunteering in the justice system. There are numerous ways for you to get to know her. She is not a fraud. Furthermore, I lack the funds to compensate her for lying to me." Cindy and I get a glare from Mona. "You've discovered a bumbler who is willing to take advantage of you, then. Significant. All you're trying to do is irritate me. Not her, you love me. I've met her parents and family, and they all tell me she's a spitfire, and I believe them." Cindy steps forward, Mona, and I have to grasp her arm to keep her from exploding. Maybe I should have, but I don't think Herring would find it funny. Cindy pauses, takes my hand courteously, and casts a downward glance at Mona. "When he told me how large of a woman you truly were, I didn't believe him. I assumed he was just resentful. However, he was correct. How he tolerated you for as long as he did is beyond me. Perhaps you are correct, too. He might still be in love with you. Even after I made the decision to break up with Andy, I continued to adore him. But tonight, Lou is going to be all over me, and I'm going to be all over him. If I can get him to fall in love with me instead of you, you better know I will." Myers just sits there, a bewildered expression on her face, as she turns, kisses me, and marches out of the office. The remainder of the session is incredibly ineffective, as could be predicted. There are many embarrassing things that can occur in this life, but one of the most embarrassing is surviving when all you fully anticipate to do is something I've learned the hard way. I managed to make myself as comfortable as possible despite having 3 broken ribs, a concussion, a broken nose, a medically removed spleen, a broken arm, a shattered collarbone, and a broken leg. I awaken in Shands Medical Center in Jacksonville, where I was transported after the rescue team discovered my nearly intact Centurion tucked in the muck near the edge of a small lake on the Chattahoochee National Forest. When I awaken from this haze, they are wheeling me from the air ambulance into the private patient section of Shands. A short bald doctor is walking beside me, and when I ask him if I'm dead, he just laughs and tells me that I've used up 7 lives worth of good luck in Georgia in a matter of seconds. Over the course of the next 2 days, the world becomes jumbled with needles, fussy nurses, and glimpses of familiar faces as I drift in and out of consciousness, sometimes from the pressures of what is sticking into me, other times from the demands of my body. I think Mom is there. I think I might even see Herring and his large shadow. I recall the journey from Tennessee that ended in North Georgia. I have a faint idea of what had happened and what is happening to me. It comes back to me in flashes of sight and sound, sometimes silent pictures, sometimes sounds I can't place with visuals. I can only vaguely recall how it felt to know that I was going to die, how terrified I had been right before, not wanting to go out like a candle in the wind, and how oddly peaceful I had felt in those final moments as I heard the Centurion dive through tree limbs toward the ground. The most significant thing, the only thing that will genuinely make me wish I had died in those moments, is something I cannot recall now. During the first few days, as I drift in and out of consciousness, I've had some indications that something strange is happening. Every now and then, I look up to see a nurse or two staring at me with the weirdest damned look on their faces. I can't quite put my finger on it, and that bothers me. A nurse once stopped to change the dressing on my right arm for a minute, and when I looked over, her hands were resting on my right arm and shoulder, and tears were in her eyes. I thought to myself, what in the hell? I don't know her, and I know damned well that she doesn't know me. Norman had banged a few nurses, and I'd met a few through him, but she isn't one of them. Plus, she's too damned old, anyway. She must be in her 52nds. I would say anything, but I have no idea what to say. She merely wipes the tears from her eyes, completes her work, and exits the ICU, where they still have me, but not before turning to face me and giving me that blasted weird look. My mother comes into the private room 3 days after I'm brought in, weeps, fusses, and cries some more. I assure her I'm okay, that she doesn't have to cry any longer, and then damned if she doesn't cry again. I contact Cindy on her cell phone and then at her residence. The call goes to voicemail. I leave a dozen messages. No callbacks. She just gasps and falls into tears when I ask her where Cindy is and why my fiancé hasn't stopped by to see me. I'm starting to wonder if I entered a strange parallel universe and ended myself in the Twilight Zone. A world where I'm a tragic hero rather than a shyster lawyer who just so happened to escape death. I looked over at them, bewildered, and there he is, the same short, bald doctor, in my room with some newspapers that he puts down on the stand by my bed. They hadn't installed a TV in my room, and I haven't stayed up late enough to miss it. But I haven't watched any news programs either, even though I'm starting to get back into the swing of things enough to start wondering what had happened in the interim and what kind of response, if any, the outside world had to my little trip. I glance over at this person I've named Baldy, after the role he would have played in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He looks peculiar, though not with the staring look the nurses have given me. Then it hits me, finally putting a name on that expression. They were staring at me the way adolescent lovesicks looked at the long-haired, dewy-eyed, androgynous rock and roll boy band heartthrobs. They were starry-eyed. I begin to feel afraid. I could pretend that one or two glances might have been misinterpreted, but all the damn females in the hospital have been giving me that look. Have I really entered the twilight zone? I start piecing together bits and pieces of memories, and it all starts to come together. I have somehow turned into a romantic hero. I've never in my life imagined a lady looking at me the way that a nearly middle-aged, sandy-haired, 6-footer with not too traditionally chiseled features, significant motion picture parts, top 10 musical credits, or Super Bowl medals are getting from ladies. I'm beginning to feel afraid, I admit to Baldy. What is going on here? Though I've never seen this specific combination before, he gives me a look that I do recognize. It's both envy and pity. If you are ever unlucky enough to receive it, you will quickly realize that it is an incredibly strange and unpleasant mix. You don't remember. Have I missed anything significant that occurred before to my departure from Tennessee? Something that transpired on the way. Nothing that occurred after my crash could be the cause, could it? Something is there. It's almost as if I could touch it. What am I attempting to recall? He gestures to the newspapers that are placed on the bedside stand. I shoot him a questioning glance, but all he does is gesture toward the newspapers and shoot me that same look. I take up the top newspaper with my left hand and stretch over. The Florida Times-Union is this. I look up the date. It is dated Wednesday of this week. It's Friday now. Monday night was the crash. As usual, I scan the front page, reading from top left to bottom right. My attention is drawn to the title and the images in the upper left section of the newspaper. A file photo of me from a piece they ran on one of my trials some years ago is visible. Additionally, a photo of Mona at a society function is shown. She looks incredibly hot in something slinky and low-cut. She has a smile on her face. It was not me. It's a warm smile, though. Across the top of the entire paper is a large headline. Hell, this isn't how large headlines about declarations of war get. I cherish you. Always have and always intend to. My fingers go numb all of a sudden and the paper falls out. My heart feels like it's going to burst from my chest. Are fainting incidents actually occurring? Might I be experiencing a heart attack? My recollections of those final minutes come flooding back. It makes sense why I couldn't recall. My heart feels as though it is being torn out of my chest. How come I didn't just pass away? One of the paper's top writers, Carl Cameron, bylined the story that appears beneath the headline. He once wrote a profile of me, so I know that. During his 50 years as a ham radio operator, Harold Grimes has received a lot of strange messages through his radio. However, he claimed that no other communication had affected him the way the call he received on Monday night had. The retired Seaboard Coastline engineer from Georgia, who is 67 years old, has been the recipient of emergency notification, birth and death messages, and distress calls. However, this one. I was watching a TV Land rerun of The Fall Guy when I heard something, or thought I heard something through the static. The area north of us is very wild. We occasionally get requests for assistance or a plane seeking for a spot to land. Until I received the signal, I fiddled with the radio settings. A man was there, and he was yelling. I managed to discern enough details to determine that he was traveling northward on a private aircraft. It was a poor night, with plenty of wind and rain and not many locations for a plane to land. He let me know his name was Lewis Waters, I thought, although I found out later that it was Walters. I tried to get some coordinates to help anyone looking for him find him, but he wouldn't have any part of it. He said he didn't have any time and wanted me to write down what he told me. He said he only had a few seconds. He seemed desperate. Throughout the conversation, Grimes has maintained composure. He now pauses, and when he speaks again, his voice becomes nearly silent. He said, "Mona, I love you. Always have. Always will. Should have forgiven you. Sorry." He stopped talking, and I waited for a few seconds before I asked, "Mr. Waters, is there anything else you want me to pass on? Who should I notify?" I jotted down his words without even considering they were meaningful. I thought I heard something like tree limbs snapping, but it was calm. It seems that he was still holding down the radio key. He then added, "That's all," in a voice so faint I could hardly hear it, and after that there was just static. With the knowledge that they would forward it, I picked up a phone and dialed the sheriff's office. After that, I simply read what he had asked me to share while sitting in my easy chair. I'm not that sensitive of a guy. Avoid crying easily. Louise, my wife, used to refer to me as a traditional hard-ass prior to her demise. However, it got to me. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, thinking about this poor guy out there alone, in the storm, in a plane going down. He had to think he wasn't going to make it. This Mona has to be a truly unique individual. It was evident from his voice. For her, he had it rough. He realized he had erred, even if I'm not sure what she had done to him. He would never get the chance to forgive her because he didn't. To be very honest, it made me a little teary-eyed. It turns out that Mona is actually Lewis Walters' ex-wife, Mona Harris, who was divorced 9 months ago in a fairly spectacular court case by a well-known Jacksonville attorney with a national practice out of his Jacksonville office, following a nearly year-long legal battle sparked by what Ms. Harris admitted was a year-long affair with Walters' former partner, Norman Miller. My comment: it is quite insane to keep talking to a woman like this. We will see how OP reacts in the ending.